And we are here. Good evening, good morning, Mr.
Yes.
Schreiber.
Hello.
May I call you Ian?
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
And people are going to join in, hopping soon enough, because we have a certain delay of the stream,
Okay.
so they will be in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, I was gonna say, will I see the list of people or anything like that? Let's see.
And our stream is slowly populating. Yep. Small introduction in Russian. Всем привет, добрый вечер, спасибо, что подключаетесь, спасибо, что еще не спите. У нас в гостях Иэн Шрайбер, один из сооснователей Global Game Jam. У нас сессия в формате вопросы и ответы. Сейчас он расскажет немного о себе, после чего вы можете задавать все вопросы в комментариях. Я буду их озвучивать, переводить и спрашивать у нашего уважаемого спикера. So, in order to begin, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little more about you?
All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Ian Schreiber. I'm reporting in from Rochester, New York, in the USA. I've been organizing game jams since 2006. So this will be my 15th year of organizing some game jam or other. I'm one of the 4 co-founders of Global Game Jam back in 2009. I've always been an advocate of game jamming as a way to to learn new skills, to have fun, to do cool experimental stuff. It's always just been kind of a huge positive thing for me. So that's kind of why I'm here. Other than game jams, I also do, I teach game design at Rochester Institute of Technology. My research areas are serious games, and game balance, and and experimental gameplay.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, Rochester Institute of Technology, it's state New York, right?
Yes, it's Western New York. It's a little confusing for people outside the country because New York is also a city, but it's also a state.
Yeah.
The state is actually very large. So I am about an 8-hour drive from the city, New York. So if you think of like the Twin Towers and the giant, right, that's not where I am. I'm in Western New York on the other side of the state, quite a distance away.
Well, just in this particular case, you see, RIT is among other universities that are on a regular basis providing education for students from our country that are participating in a state program that allows them to study abroad. So there would be more people knowing where exactly RIT is and what it is about here, hopefully.
Yep. So we have a very established game development program here. It's been going on for almost 20 years at this point. We have an undergrad program and a graduate level program in game design and development.
So Global Game Jam.
Yes.
It was a long way, right?
Yeah.
And how did you ended up with this idea?
So
why hackathons? Why that?
Yeah. So the original idea for this came from Susan Gold. And she, we'd all been running game jams for a while. I know I particularly was inspired by the indie game jam that had presented itself for many years at the Game Developers Conference at GDC. And they always did some really cool experimental stuff. And it was basically an invite-only thing where they would bring some really talented developers together, lock them in a room for 4 days, and see what came out of it. And then they presented the results at GDC. I always found that really inspiring, and me and many other people thought of, maybe we should try a game jam and see how it goes. And so I did this with students. I did this with local communities, back in 2006, 2007. In the year 2008, Susan Gold came to me. She's like, "Hey, you do some stuff with game jams, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, I've got an idea for an event. Why don't we do a game jam, but it's in running in multiple places around the world all at once. And what do you think of this? Like, tell me if this is crazy. And I said, wow, I love this idea. What can I do to help? And that's kind of how I got involved. The first year we just kind of didn't know what we were doing. It was all experimental. No one had ever done a game jam on that kind of scale before. We would have been happy if we had 50 people in 3 different sites, just to say, hey, we did a concurrent game jam with a couple things. We ended up with about 50 different sites and about 1,500 people, which just far exceeded our expectations for what we would have done in the very first year trying this when we didn't know what we were doing. And then things grew from there. Pretty much every year for the first 10 years, we grew by about 50% year to year, to the point where now this thing is so huge. It's larger than GDC. It's larger than the largest game developer events anywhere else. It is the largest game jam that normally takes place in person. It's actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for that. It's gotten big enough that most of the people that are running it these days, I don't know, and I've never met them. Because it's just, it has kind of taken on a life of its own and grown so much. And I've kind of been amazed at, the path that it has taken. And I've always been really excited that I could be a part of setting this in motion.
And since it grew so big, it became such a major event over time, and so many people are participating. Obviously, something great happened on the basis of these of people participating on the hackathon. Could you share some most inspiring moments of people's achievements, of games that made some impact, or maybe something like that, something that would inspire?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 kinds of. There's so many examples of that. That instead of speaking about specific individual things, I'll talk about 2 common patterns that I've seen, and these are patterns that I've seen a lot. One is people coming into Global Game Jam, maybe not knowing what to expect, having never done this before. They're not even necessarily that interested in making games. They heard about this from somewhere else, or they're doing this with a friend or something. They never really thought about making games as a career. They're just doing this for fun as an event, just kind of on its own. And they come out of this saying, that was so much fun. I'm changing my career. That I want to be a professional game developer now. This is what I want to do with my life. And to me, being able to help someone find a passion that they never even knew they had is pretty amazing. The other thing that I found that's a pattern is whenever there's any kind of festival or awards or things like that these days, where especially for independent games, so IGF, Indiecade, there's a bunch of independent game festivals out there where they just take submissions of games, they give awards, they showcase some of the best games to have come out in the past year. And whenever I'm in person there, or whenever I have the opportunity to talk with the people whose games are being featured, I always ask them, what's the origin story? Where did the idea for this game come from in the first place? How did you make it? And I'd say about a third of the time, the answer I get is, well, this started in a game jam. And I'd say about a sixth of the time, this started in Global Game Jam. So we've had over the years a lot of different games that have come out of Global Game Jam. They're not ready for being released right at the end of the weekend. But what happens is that during Global Game Jam, people try something. It's bold, it's interesting, it's experimental, and it shows itself as a proof of concept. It shows that, whoa, I've done game jams before, but this thing right here is really special. I should do something with this. And then what they'll do is they'll take that project and continue working on it, and work on it for another 6 months, another year, another 2 years, and bring it into something that can go on Steam, or that can win awards in a festival, or things like that. It's all kinds of things. So there's so many different paths there, but usually that's what happens. That people try a game during the game jam, and most of the time it's nothing special. Most of the time people do finish their game, and it's a cool game, and I made it, and it's special to me. But it's still nothing really groundbreaking. And every now and then you get one that is. And I think it's just a numbers game. If you've got 5,000 people all making, or if you've got 5,000 games that are made in a weekend, some number of those are going to be really awesome just by accident. It's a whole million monkeys on a million keyboards will reproduce Shakespeare kind of thing. It's a little bit more involved than that, but there is some skill involved here, although it's a very different kind of skill, right? But but I think you get enough people making games, eventually you're going to, especially in an environment that's set up to be creative, you're going to get some interesting things out of it. You almost can't help but do that, especially at this scale.
Sure, of course. And as much as participating in a hackathon on this scale can be inspiring and provide you with a fair amount of satisfaction of delivering something in the end, it can be dissatisfying as well in case participants will, do some quite common mistakes that many newbies on hackathons do. Could you maybe address advices what not to do, what not to try, what to avoid during participation?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that it depends on is, what are your goals for this? And different people have different goals, right? Some people are doing this just for the fun of taking in joy in creation. And they don't really care what comes out of it. They just want to do something. They want to go through the process. And for that, there's really no wrong way. There are some people that it's like, I want to create an innovative, groundbreaking game. Is there a process for that? That's a little bit harder, right? It's you can't always guarantee success there. There's some people that are doing this to learn. It's like, I want to increase my skills at game development. I want to get more experience. So one thing is just be clear about what your personal goals are. What do you want to get out of this thing? And and have an honest discussion with your team to see if your goals align. If you've got one person who's like, I want to make a top quality game that looks and sounds great, and you've got someone else that says, I always wanted to do game audio. I've never done it before, so I'm going to be really bad at it. But I'd like to try it. There's going to be a goal mismatch there, and that's going to be a discussion that you're going to want to have. To make sure that everyone can do the things that they want to do. If your goal is to learn, then you want to figure out, well, what is it that you want to learn? What do you want to pick up a new skill, or do you want to practice an existing skill to make it stronger? And then you just choose your role to do the thing that you want to do. As far as making the best game that you can, one thing is just going into this understanding that game development is a chaotic process, and there are no guarantees, right? Even in the professional game industry, with teams of experienced professionals who have been doing this for years, not too many people know this from outside the industry, but the number of games that actually make money is 10%, right? 90% of professionally created games lose money, either because the project is canceled, or it releases and no one buys it, or whatever. 90% fail rate from the best and most qualified people in the world. So as a game jammer, you're not going to do better, right? Just accept that as part of it. and that's okay. It means if your game is not that great, that's okay. Take what you can learn from that. You'll get a bunch of experience. You'll learn a bunch of stuff not to do that works and that doesn't work for your personal workflow. So a lot of this is coming down to that. Things you can do to set yourself up for having the best chance at success. There's a couple things I can say. One is definitely just take care of your body, especially this year, because this is going on for 4 days instead of, right? It's still supposed to be a 48-hour game jam. You just have more flexibility in what the hours are, right? You don't stay up 24/7 for 4 days straight. You're not going to be in very good shape after that. I generally say don't pull all-nighters in general. Get a good night's sleep. Take regular breaks where you get away from your computer, go out for a walk, stretch, something. Make sure you have you eat when you're hungry. You have plenty of good food. Keep yourself in peak physical condition. Because I'll tell you, if you pull an all-nighter, if you go 24 hours with no sleep, your brain is in a state that is almost identical to being drunk. You've got slower reaction times. It's harder for you to think. It's harder for you to judge how tired you are. If any of you have ever pulled an all-nighter before and you've had that experience of getting your second wind, is what we call it in English, like getting, like suddenly getting a rush of energy and feeling like you're not tired anymore in the middle of the night, that's not actually more energy. That's the point at which the part of your brain that's judging how tired you are is so tired that it can no longer function. So you just don't realize how tired you are. You still are. They've done experiments in sleep labs with this, where they've checked people's reaction times and alertness levels and all kinds of things like that, based on them self-reporting when the second wind happens. It is totally an illusion. So if you want to do well, pace yourself, and take good care of your mind and your body, and get plenty of rest. That's one thing. The other thing I say is, at the beginning of the jam, you'll have all these different ideas for things to do. And it might be too late. You might, at this point, you're 4 hours in, so you might already be locked into a certain way of doing things. But I'd say, always throw out your first 3 ideas, because those are the obvious ones that everyone else is also going to be doing. If you want to do something innovative, like, just keep brainstorming until you come up with something that seems really original and really interesting. Make sure that you have everyone on board with it, with your team. The other thing I say is, that helps is try to get to a first playable version as quickly as possible. Right? Don't try and scope your project for a 48-hour project. Scope it for like a 4 to 6 hour project. Right? Try to get something that's at least working on the screen with the basic functionality before you go to sleep tonight, if you can, or at least as close to it as possible thereafter. And then what I tell people is, all right, then the next morning, try it again. So Thursday morning, try it again. Start over from scratch, new idea. Try to get something up and running before lunch, and then after lunch, try and get a third idea up and running before dinner. And then you'll have 3 basic ideas that have already been prototyped out. Your team can then sit around over dinner, kind of look at each of these 3 things and decide, does any of these feel really a lot more special than the other ones? And if it does, then it's like, okay, now we can take that and build it out for the remaining part of the jam. And right, and if none of them do, then you can just do more prototypes, right? But basically, don't be afraid. Try to get to a first playable version as quickly as possible, so that because once you can play a game, that's where it becomes really obvious whether this idea is actually going anywhere or not. Because you'll tell the difference between the things that are like, yeah, I got something working on the screen, great, versus something that's like, wow, this is like a stupid little 15-second prototype that is just, and everyone, and I just can't stop playing it just because it's so fun. and this is true in the game industry too. You know that you've got something special going on when everyone in the office is using their coffee breaks to to play this 15-minute prototype instead of getting their work done. Right. So don't be afraid to blow everything up and start over again. Worst case, you've got multiple failed projects instead of one. And if you can make 6 games in Global Game Jam that all are terrible, that's still 5 more games than most people make. So don't be afraid to start over if you need to. If you're looking at things and realizing, yeah, this idea just isn't working.
So basically, put some realistic goals.
Yeah.
Eat your dish in smaller chunks, and stay healthy. Control your physical condition, sleep well, and so on. Those advices are basically useful in everywhere.
In games, in jam,
and especially in game jam as well. Yeah. Now, some questions from the audience. Do you study Team Fortress Balance in university? Well, basically, do you study game balance in general in university?
Yeah, I mean, you don't usually study individual games other than just as examples of things. As far as game balance itself, I actually do teach a course in game balance. Here, and so this is a full semester-long course just focused on balance. And it covers a lot of things, right? It's not just like, let's study the balance of this one game. It's studying the techniques of how do you balance a game in general. I give a whole lot of techniques. This is one, like I said, this is one of my research areas. I just finished writing a book on this. It should be out in later this year. It's the manuscript is into the publisher, so now we get to go through the editing pass and everything. I actually have an online course that I put together 10 years ago. It's called GameBalanceConcepts.wordpress.com. So it's all in wall of text blog form, but it is, it's still there. And if you want something right now in terms of like, what do I teach in terms of how to balance games, it's there.
Okay, so a question. I really want to do my master's in serious games abroad. What would be a determinal statement to review for you, for example?
Okay, so I guess I'm a little unclear what that means, because I think to me detrimental means bad, and so like, what would be a bad statement in a letter of recommendation? Oh, okay, so so as far as asking for, usually the letters of recommendation we get, the students aren't the people who are applying aren't the ones who are writing them or reading them. So basically, usually with the letters of recommendation, those aren't generally a deciding factor for admission into our graduate program. I know that, because generally you ask people that are going to say nice things about you, right? So my goal, if you're asking people for letters of recommendation, I would say go to people that are going to write good ones. So that means people that you have worked with in the past. Either you've taken a class with them recently, or you've maybe done work in their lab, or you've done something where you've worked closely enough with them that they know your name, they know your face, they know who you are. And you've done well enough with them that they would be willing to write good things, right? Obviously, if you took a class with a professor and you goofed off during the entire thing, didn't do any of your work, it never went to office, never went to see them, for office hours or anything, and they're not going to know you, or they're going to look you up and be like, yeah, this person got a mediocre grade in my class, and then probably don't ask that person. And one thing you can do with people that you're asking for letters of recommendation for is to say, if I asked you to write a letter of recommendation, would you be able to write me a good one? Instead of saying, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? If you ask that, then that gives them the option to say, no, I don't think I could, or who are you again? Without you formally asking them. And if they really like what you've done and they're more than happy to write a glowing letter of recommendation, then they'll say, oh, yes, I would absolutely love to do that. Where do I send it? And then they'll volunteer. So ideally, that's the position you're in.
Amiran asks, what advices can you give to the fresh beginners in game dev, especially those who study software development in university? He also asks advices for game jam especially, but we already covered that one.
Yep.
So just to make it clear, in universities here in Kazakhstan, we do study software development in a more practical way. So they might have now classes that would be including usage of Unreal Engine or Unity 3D engine, but they won't dig into game design or game balance or something like that. It will be just try that out and be good with that.
Yeah.
So what would you give us advice for that?
Yep. So I mean, I'll tell you something, especially in the field of game design, right? This isn't a field that's been around for thousands of years. This is a field of study that started off, that really only became a field of study where you could study it in university maybe about 20 years ago. And as far as college majors go, that's very new. So there's a so we're all still figuring this out. And you think about, well, the game industry itself existed for 30 years before that. So where did these game designers come from? Where did the game designers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s learn game design from? It wasn't university, because that didn't exist. The answer is we're all self-taught. People in the early days, they learned game design by doing game design. And that's what I would say, especially for any creative field. And I would actually include programming in this, right? There's programming, you have to convert a spec into code, but there are many ways to do that, right? So for any of these fields, it's like you can, there's kind of the theory and the practice. The analogy I give is painting, right? If you wanted to be a wonderful master painter, I could lecture you all day on on the theory of composition and color theory and line and brushstroke technique and all these other things. But at the end of the day, you've got to paint, and you have to paint, and you have to paint a lot. And most of your early paintings are going to be awful, and you have to get that out of your system in order to get to the good paintings. You have to build up that skill. Same thing. Professional authors have a saying that you throw away your first million words. So I think there's a lot of that sense in, if any of you have ever played a musical instrument, right? You never start out playing beautiful music. You start out playing awful music, and then you practice and you practice and you practice some more. And eventually you've got years and years of practice to the point where you can make an instrument sound good, right? The user interface on instruments is awful, all of them, if you need to do it, right? So with games, it's the same thing, right? I'd say my advice would be, don't wait for any professor's permission to make a game. Start making games. Do it on your own. If you don't know how, there's lots of online tutorials, and just fumble around and try and figure things out on your own. That struggle, you will learn a lot. Events like game jams are really good for that kind of thing, because it stops you from getting too deep in to a single project, right? Do lots and lots of short projects. Don't do any really long ones that you'll get caught up in for years, because if you're just beginning, you won't have the skills to finish that. So do really small things that you can finish in a game jam, things you can finish in a week or a weekend, and just do lots and lots and lots of those. And because every project you work on, you have to go through that full process from figuring out what you're going to do at the beginning, doing the development grind of making it happen in the middle, being at that horror point at the end of, oh, I'm not going to make it, there's too much stuff here and I'm not going to be able to implement it all. What features do I cut? Right? You go through the whole project cycle. And the more times you go through that, the more you get used to it, the more the flow of development is something that becomes natural to you. And you build up your skills a lot. So just being here and showing up to Global Game Jam is a great step for beginners. This was always designed to be a beginner level event.
By the way, nowadays it almost become a full-time profession for some people to do those gems. I mean, with the rise of the hyper-casual games nowadays, for the last several years, there are actual companies that have actual departments that do gems after gems after gems, just to dig out those game mechanics that would then go boom and go viral.
And it's about time too. As I've been advocating that in the game industry for like 15 years. That why not? Game jams are cheap, and development is expensive. And so if you can have much more certainty that you'll be developing something that's going to be a hit, why not do that?
Sure.
So yeah.
And should be the last question for today. Could you, well, I wouldn't say list a number of books or resources that might boost skills, just some must-read or must-read books that you would think should be read at least once.
So I'll tell you a story. It's a very common question because the first thought is like, oh, there must be a ton of wisdom in a book somewhere. If I want to study this, I should go read a book, or I should go take a class, and things like that, right? That's and there are a lot of books out there. Most of the books that are worth reading are very niche. They cover like one topic. So if you're looking for like a single book that tells you everything you need to know about game development ever, here's all you need to know about programming and game design and visual art and animation and audio and production, right? That book doesn't exist. I mean, there are a couple of comprehensive books like that, and they're these giant tomes, and no one ever reads them. If you want a book like specifically on game balance, I've got one of those coming out. If you want a book specifically on beginner level game design, the ones that most people use are, there's our Game Design Workshop by Tracy Fullerton, Art of Game Design, A Book of Lenses by Jesse Schell, and Challenges for Game Designers by Brenda Brathwaite and myself. If you want to learn game programming, there's a ton of texts out there. But again, most of them, it depends on what you're learning, right? If you're just learning, if you don't know any programming at all, you probably don't want to start with a game programming text. You probably want to start with just finding something to teach you basic concepts of programming, like what is an if statement, what is a for loop, what is a variable. Get that stuff under your belt first, and then you can pick, something like a game engine like Unity or Unreal, and you can find all kinds of things out there to get yourself up to speed on that. And those can be, there are tons of books written on, on how to develop in Unity, how to develop in Unreal. There's books still out there on how to develop in Flash, and you can't even do that anymore, right? So the downside of books for things like specific technologies is that they go out of date almost as soon as they're published. Because it's like, great, I know how to publish in Unreal 3, but we're on Unreal 4 now. So good luck. So those things are out of date. As far as art and animation goes, I'm not an artist. I have no art skills at all. So I really don't know how artists learn their craft as much. That's not my field. Same thing with audio. I can't really give you great resources on that. I will say, don't limit yourself to books. There are tons of great tutorial videos, streamers, websites that teach these kinds of things here. If you're one place, if you want to get like just beginner level starting information that's just taking me from I know nothing to I know enough to at least participate in a game jam, there is one great resource. It's actually ggjnext.org. If you saw the keynote video from this year, that got a mention there. It's specifically a game jam, global game jam like event that we've put together for teenagers for like 12 to 17 years old. That's out there. And on that website, there's a tab called Curriculum. And under Curriculum, there are a bunch of bite-sized 5 to 10 minute videos that are just describing how to make games on every category. Here's how to do some art for your games. Here's how to do programming for your games. I think we have tutorials for both Game Maker and Unity on there, and we're adding more stuff every now and then. Here's how to do project management, right? Like all the kinds of things. And those videos they're all short. They're like 5 to 10 minutes. There's a ton of them on basically every possible thing you can topic you can imagine for beginner level game development. Really, we put those videos together not for kids to learn. We put them together to teach teachers, so that if you have educators who say, maybe I'm a teacher in primary school who's got a bunch of students who want to learn game development, and I know nothing. I'm an English teacher. What do I know? Or whatever. I teach maths, but I know nothing about games. This is how to teach a teacher how to teach basic game development skills to a bunch of kids. But you can definitely use them as just, here's some beginner level resources to get you from I know nothing to, I can at least do this in a game jam. And it won't get you to professional level, but it'll at least get you some basic skills that you can work with to fake it. So you can do that.
Thank you very much for the answers, for your time, for joining us. And since you will be participating, as you mentioned, this year as well, you will be developing something in the team, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping to develop something with my daughter, actually. So my daughter she's 10 years old this year. She's been doing game jams since she was 5. This is her. She's done over 10 game jams by now. I've kind of lost count. So I don't know, but this will be her 4th global game jam in a row. And in the past, I've never participated because I've always been on the organizing side. But this year, since there's really not much to do on organizing, I'm probably going to just participate with her. I've done 2 game jams with my daughter before, and we've always come up with really interesting stuff. Little kid, if you have any little kids like 5 to 10 years old on your team, they make the best game designers because they have no filter at all. They just come up with these crazy ideas that no adult would be able to come up with, right? My daughter, like the first time I jammed with my daughter, she had me make this game where you're a flying wolf trying to rejoin your pack, and you get there by smelling things. It's like, I never could have come up with that. Like, you're a wolf with magic and wings. Why? Because that's what my daughter said. Definitely take advantage of that creativity if you've got it. If there's any parents that are participating this year, just ask your kid what you should do. You'll come up with something very original.
An obligatory message to the viewers: don't use this advice as a business opportunity to use a child labor and so on. It's not a good idea. But for the hackathon, sure, and as a family bonding event, of course. Well, we wish you good luck. Thank you very much. And since you will be participating, I'm not going to spoil you the topic. Wait for another 6.5 hours.
All right. Good luck for everyone. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of your jam.